podcast world, Cabin Studios, welcome to another episode of The Value, the language of business for those of you seeking to build or invest in companies that are scalable and highly valuable. I'm your host, Kevin Valley, and today we are talking about one of my favorite topics. Now, I'm not a master of this topic, but I would say, just like our guest today, I'm a lifelong student of this topic. Today we are talking to data enthusiast, data lecturer, data aficionado, data thought leader of the Caribbean in her own way, Mrs. Raquel Seville. Raquel, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kevin. I am great. How are you doing?
I am cool, man. I'm just looking forward to this conversation, this drinking. I think we just had a little tea cheers
Yeah.
just before we hit
Very.
record. I was telling you that in doing this show for the past 7 years now, typically I'll be drinking some sort of rum while interviewing my guests. But in this age of data, in this age of AI, I consulted with my good friend ChatGPT, and I said, hey, I'm about to interview Raquel Seville. Should I drink tea or should I drink rum tonight? And they told me to drink tea. I'm like, boring, fine. So next time I'm just going to go with my gut and drink some rum. But anyway.
Put on, I hope.
That's a good joke. I love it. All right, Raquel. So obviously you're hail from the island of Kingston, Jamaica, I understand. Before we get into all of the hard data stuff, I just want to understand your story, right? So imagine it like if we're watching a quick movie, like a highlight reel of your life that captures the behind the scenes, let's say from your childhood, up until that point where you decide, hey, what data is life. At that point, I think it was after you did your undergrad in computer science and you started to do internships in data science and whatnot. So yeah, can you just run that film first?
Sure. All right. So, Raquel, younger Raquel, very shy, very reserved. Definitely did not think I'd be in a career in data. Actually wanted to be a pediatrician. That was the goal. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing, chemistry, I'm doing biology. I'm like, yeah, because, you got to do the sciences if you want to do medicine. And then I was like, yeah, I'm not so liking chemistry. Not really doing it for me. So by the time I got to like doing CXC, and then I was like, yeah, no, it's not gonna work. I don't think I'm gonna pass this. My high school they were graceful enough to allow me to transition to accounts. It was like the only other thing. I was just like, I'll just do whatever. I'll just fill the gap with something. So I did principles of accounts. But that kind of made me realize like, yeah, maybe I'm not gonna go down the path of a pediatrician, right? But then IT, when I did CXC IT, I was like, this is interesting. All the different things that we were learning. It was very hands-on at the time. We were building network cables, right? We were building computers from the ground up. We're doing everything from the ground up. I found that to be extremely fascinating. So definitely piqued my interest to say, yeah, I like IT. So I did computer science in sixth form. And when I did computer science, I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I think I'll apply to, university to do computer science. That transition from information technology to computer science. When I got into the computer science at University of the West Indies, Mona campus, I was like, okay, perfect. In doing computer science, I'm like, okay, this is a lot of programming. Like we're learning base languages, right? Transitioning from like IT, computer science in A levels, and then to do computer science at the university level, it's like literally night and day. So, I mean, I wasn't really like, okay, I did programming. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I could sit and do this all day. It's interesting to create something, but not necessarily to earn a living from it. It wasn't something I was excited about. So I was more interested in like artificial intelligence and database management systems. Like those were more the subjects that I was doing. I was like, yeah, I like this.
At that time?
Yeah, at that time. Yeah.
Because we're talking like 2005, 2006, right?
Yeah. Back in, a little bit. I'm like 2002. Like,
Listen, I old too, it's okay. It's okay. We will. So 2002, so around 2002, artificial intelligence was actually a field of study.
Yeah, it was actually, yep.
Okay.
It was, but it was an elective. It was like a third year elective for computer science majors. When I finished UE, I was like, okay, not sure where I'm gonna land because I don't want to go into the traditional field that you'd expect a computer science major to do. So I landed an internship at T-Brand Wireless. So I was like, okay, after doing a programming internship. So I did that, and coming out of that internship, there was a role that opened up on the business intelligence team for a data analyst, and I got that role. Thankfully, applied and got the role, and that's literally how I sort of fell into data. Like it wasn't like a natural, like that you explore and then you just find a path, and did that. Like spent over a decade in corporate, working across different data roles until eventually I transitioned to co-founding my own consultancy. So the younger Raquel was very much maybe like any other younger person. You really don't know what you want to do. You think you know, but you really don't know for sure.
What I heard in that story, and thanks for that, what I heard in that story is very much a journey through curiosity. Because you tried a multitude of things. You tried things from some business, from science to the arts to history and all that, just to see, okay, does this gel with me? So it has that sort of exploratory mindset. It tells me like, duh, no wonder she's into data sciences because she likes to accumulate as much information as possible before she makes a decision. So that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Okay, so you started off pretty much in the telecom space, which is one of the big industries here in the region, especially in Jamaica. And you said after 14 years in corporate, you decided you wanted to start your own business, and this business being BI Brains Group. Tell me about that transition and what led to that.
So the fun thing is during my time working in telecommunications, I met a young lady who eventually I did the joint venture with to create BI Brains Caribbean. So she was also in the data space. She was doing training, consulting, and she was doing it under like for a different company. And then when she spoke to me about the opportunity for us to do a joint venture and create this new entity that would be focused specifically around data analytics consulting, data storytelling, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Because at that point, I think corporate for me, I kind of felt like I tapped out from a data perspective. I was a director for analytics and intelligence for K-Band Wireless. Yeah, funny story. I started at K-Band Wireless, went to Digital, went to Columbus Communications, which is a Canadian company. And then Columbus Communications got acquired by K-Band Wireless. So I ended up back at K-Band Wireless. So yeah, and then in the telecommunications in the region, like we're typically, it's set up like a group structure, right? So you're typically doing reporting for like, 20 Caribbean countries, 26 Caribbean countries. Like I did, so it was like almost 30 Caribbean countries. So it's really a lot of data, like, petabytes of data, or not more than that at this point, that you're working with. Like data is just being generated as you think about it, you make a call, there's what they call a call detail record, and that's like it's a two-side record that is generated like for every single, and that's just calls that people don't even do as much anymore, right? Like physical pick up the phone and dial, so you're talking data being generated now, a person's using data, right? Your online traffic, visiting different platforms like Facebook, Instagram. So it's just a lot of data. And the cool thing about working in telecoms is that data, you're so focused on how you can create the best products to serve the consumer and of course generate revenue for the company. But your whole focus is around, analyzing that data and getting the most out of that data. So that was really a fun experience. So I just thought, yeah, this has been fun. It's been good to actually work with different companies in different industries and not just telecommunications. So consulting was that path. So that's how BI Brain Caribbean was founded. So it's like a joint venture between BI Brain US and myself to create a Caribbean entity. So we did that for over 6 years, working with different companies. Like I was thinking about like the data points just now. Like we trained, like physically trained in terms of individuals, over 300 students across the Caribbean. We work with probably over 30 corporate companies, and these are like mostly large, medium to large companies. and also like provide employment, mentorship, internship for over a dozen individuals throughout the course of that time. So it's like really like I was looking back, I was like, yeah, those numbers aren't too bad in terms of just a Caribbean company focusing very nichely on data, right? It's not like we were doing anything else and we're just trying to be a data company. That part has been very, very fun and exciting and fulfilling. Working with different companies across the Caribbean was really an exciting experience, I'd say, at a time when there was no one that had a data niche company. But at the time, persons were like, "Are you sure you want to do like a data company and not just an IT consulting company?" So, is there a market for that? But I think that has been proven that there's clearly a market for it. And I mean, just by the numbers, the reach, the training that we've done, the impact that we've had, the companies that we've been able to work with. So it was a very fun and rewarding experience.
I could tell, I could tell. So tell me something, just in terms of like delivering your products and services to these clients, these 300 clients, assuming they're mostly B2B clients. What does a typical customer product delivery journey look like? So tell me about these different solutions you provide for them and how that whole client service cycle, what that look like.
The 300 is like individuals like that we've trained. So they would be attached to different companies or just individuals that would have wanted training where would have done training for like analytics, Power BI, and other storytelling and other types of training. So in terms of companies, like, the larger companies, Digital, NCB, etc., that we've worked with, TIDC, that we've worked with would have been 2030 in those regions. So for us, he said like product life cycle that we work through. So the thing with consulting is it can be a challenge to scale unless you've thought of, worked out like a process. Like it's really just bodies, more bodies, more humans, more humans. How can you upskill someone? How can you train them, mentor them to get them to a level where they can deliver on a project, even if it is a supporting analyst? So that takes a lot of time, takes a lot of resources. And we had to make like a really strong investment in education, in training, mentorship, just to ensure that persons get the skill sets that they need to be able to deliver. Like they would say, okay, I'm expecting Kevin's consultancy and I'm expecting Kevin level of work. So in terms of like product life cycle, we try to create different products. So we had in some ways just regular traditional consulting. We're going, we get the scope and we provide you with some sort of proposal or costing. And then there's the other side of it where if we need to have like a retainer with some sort of customers to support them, maybe a couple hours per month, and we'd have like an analyst, a dedicated analyst that would be assigned to that particular client. And then for training as well, we're doing like very specific targeted training around data and analytics. So for us, it was really trying to find that sweet spot around managing consulting, managing training, and ensuring, of course, that we have a steady cash flow for the company. Because again, consulting can be very large projects and big projects. And you have to ensure that obviously for business, like, cash flow is king. So you have to ensure that you are managing all of that, all the different projects, all the different products that you have to ensure that it's sustainable.
Yes, definitely. I mean, just as me running a consulting practice as well, it's really difficult to scale yourself. But what I've learned is that you could sort of productize your service in a way that's, it's like a standardized process flow. And you just have people handling moving parts. And also on the upskilling thing you're talking about, that is the hardest part. Upskilling other junior staff and whatnot, because you could end up in a whole trial and error cycle where you just end up with bad work. And like I've had to be up till 9 o'clock in the morning redoing work for a client meeting that was 11 o'clock in the morning. Like that happened to me last year. It's really tough. But what I've learned that you should do, especially with a service so technically proficient that requires such technical proficiency, is actually try and find somebody. This girl had about to say it. It's very difficult, but try and find somebody who's already, if not almost as good as you, possibly better than you. It's better if you could find somebody who is more technically proficient than you. That person, either they're lower cost contractor, so you mean you won't find somebody in the US who's going to charge you US prices, right? Maybe you find somebody who already has like a low cost of living or whatnot, but they're highly skilled. So I've had some success with that, but yeah, it's really, really tough.
It is. And sometimes the highly skilled people, they tend to know their worth, if you get what I'm saying. So they're not gonna accept certain price points. Like, yeah, my hourly rate is like, 250 US per hour. And you're like, yeah, okay, all right, that's fair. You know your worth kind of thing. So that is navigating that as well. But that is a really good point in terms of maybe the person doesn't necessarily have to reside like in the region. Because if you're looking highly skilled, like for us as a data, like I kind of know who I can tap already because I've most likely crossed paths with those persons, and they already know like, yeah, this is my price. You can, as you said, like look outside and see if you can find some of those persons who would be willing to contract. But yeah, I mean, that is a consulting challenge, and consulting is taking a hit right now. The big four is taking a hit in the US. So it is one of those fields that you really want to ensure that you're not just taking the approach of just, throwing bodies at projects, but you really, really have to be mindful about value, right? Pro-
Ah,
there you go.
I think
Providing
I think I
value.
like to, but I like to, but at the word value, just like you like to by the word data. But we could find some high quality, like highly intelligent, highly skilled talent for very reasonable prices. Our brothers and sisters over in the motherland. Speaking of the motherland, I understand in your journey through, especially during the time that you're operating BI Brains, you ended up all the way down in South Africa, and then you also went all the way down to Australia. Then you touched Spain, you touched USA, of course, and then you came back home to Jamaica.
Not in one trip.
And well, could you imagine? So talk about that. How that business, I'm assuming it's that business, how that business took you to be this data influencer, this thought leader, speaker all around the world.
So interestingly enough, when I started my data career, I worked with a tool again that dates and ages me called SAP Business Objects. So before Tableau, before Power BI, there was Business Objects. And I literally worked like across different companies. There were very few persons that were specialized in the specifically in analytics business object space, especially in the Caribbean. So I I got recommended for a SAP mentor, which is really just sort of highlighting the experts who are within the field. SAP is like, for those who don't know, it's like a huge German company that does ERP software across different domains, right? So they have like financial enterprise resource planning software. They have human resource. They have it across all the different business domains. So they're a really huge company. So all those different domains, they would highlight these persons who are, experts or thought leaders within the space. And I was like one of the first persons to get voted for SAP mentor from the Caribbean. So with that, I would sort of, try to put on events and meetups and try to get like, building a community. That's really what it was about. That's one of the key things, building a community around persons who had a similar interest or persons who were using the tool, and just ensuring that, you kind of get the experts who would come from SAP actually coming out of that and getting, I guess, a lot more visibility in the space. I actually was, I guess, tapped in a way by a book publisher, a German book publisher called Espresso Tutorials, to write a book, SAP, because they do SAP books, but to write about my domain and my expertise. So I wrote about OpenUI 5 for analytics and business intelligence. So that was an exciting journey, getting tapped for that, to be an author. And I mean, it's really niche. Like if you think data is niche, then this is niche within a niche, right? Coming out of that as well is also part of what raised my visibility to other conference producers like in South Africa, in Australia, because those were actually SAP headline conference or sponsored conference. And they reach out to persons who are thought leaders within the space, invited to be a speaker, all expenses paid, South Africa to Australia, took me also to California and Barcelona to actually present at conferences and speak about your work, what you're doing, what are the trends, what is happening in your particular market region, and how does that align to what is happening globally, etc. And this happened, obviously, as you said, while I would have been the CEO for BI Brains Caribbean. So that was a really fun and exciting process to be able to, one, give back to the space that I was attached to and a part of, eventually start to build out and build the visibility for data. And this is a viable field, a viable business coming out of the Caribbean, and also being able to present that, on the world stage in other markets. Pretty, pretty, pretty fun.
I didn't see any sort of travel when you were at Cable and Wireless like that. I didn't see you wasn't in Africa and Australia and Barcelona and all these places. So I mean, it sounds like you made the right decision.
No shade to Cape Brown Wireless, but yeah.
No shade, no shade, no shade. But they didn't fly nobody out to South Africa. They wasn't doing that. So this book that you said the author that you kind of that's of course you're very proud of it or whatnot. Now this is not no regular book, huh? I want podcast world to understand it's not a regular book. Okay, here's my process for data management, my 7-step process, yada yada yada, soft copy, whatever. No, this book is 294 pages with the title SAP Open UI for Mobile BI and Analytics. Right? I don't understand. I don't understand what that title even means.
That's
Right?
how
But
technical it is.
this book is technical narrated and 9 sections, and it retails for almost 50 US. So for 40 50 US. US.
Yeah.
Wow. This looks like some kind of PhD level thing.
Honestly, maybe almost like a 12-month journey. It was very intense. I can think back now and I'm like, would I write a book that technical again? Like, no. There was no chat GPT, just to say. It was a very intense process. Like, I think back and I'm like, yeah, that was a lot. Definitely, I would say, I mean, I wouldn't change anything in terms of going through the process, but writing a book like that requires so much from a technical perspective, like it's it's a lot. But I highly recommend it though for those who are interested. I highly recommend the journey.
I toy with the idea of writing a book, but I think maybe in a few years, I have a few other things I need to do first. Okay, it looks like things are going great at BI Brains. Everything is nice. I saw you guys built this really cool dashboard for stock tracking, which is kind of look like a dovetail into what you're doing at Dataffluent a little bit. But so what happened? Like, what led to the end of BI Brains?
So from a consulting perspective, so as I mentioned, it's like business partners out of the US. So we had COVID, which was a rough time, but at the same time, on like the back end of COVID, like 1 year, 2 years in, probably got like the most business, most revenue. Like everyone was like digital transformation was a thing. So we did like really great from a business perspective. And then coming out of that, persons were like, yeah, so now we want to go and in-source what we just did. So we went through a process of growing and then having to kind of shrink a little bit. And I think part of that, like you said, like, from a consulting perspective, how do you scale yourself? How do you scale Kevin? How do you create 10 Kevins? Like that's a lot. And even the big fours, like they're not doing that. They're not scaling Kevin. And I mean no shade to the process, but it's really that it's just very hard, right? To replicate, especially tacit knowledge, right? That thing that Kevin just knows because he was just in that space and he was exposed that he himself can't even explain to a junior analyst, right? So when you go through that process, you realize, okay, yeah, consulting is great, but when it is that, companies are either downsizing or shifting focus or trying to be more autonomous, you realize that, okay, if you don't have product and you're really just 100% service based, it can be really, really damaging for your cash flow. And then you have a responsibility for people and, you have to think about all of that. So I think that was one of the things that kind of happened. And I think it happened across both, like from the US side and Caribbean side. And I think it was just a time to kind of sort of pivot and shift focus. And it was just a very difficult time, to be honest with you. That's a whole thing. I think that really tested a lot of companies. It tested a lot of people. So coming out of that, I think it was just more building a resilient company, still a data company, because I think that's my passion, but still a data company, but more resilient to the shocks of what's gonna happen or what can happen, what will happen in the world.
You know, when you think about business, especially the like product business, service business, there's like this whole value ladder that you want to go up, right? So where we operate is on that service rung, right? Where we show up, we deliver service. But where we want to operate is to find ways to productize and monetize our intellectual property. That's like the next rung above that, right? Our ideas, our know-how, just our years of experience working in these firms that everybody loves and respects. But then you also need to think about how you getting that word out there, and that's where media comes in. So the rung above IP is media, is where you start to you become known for your ideas. You start to publish your ideas. You start to give talks about your ideas. You do podcasts on your ideas. You record videos on your ideas. All of these things. So media is the next rung, but the ultimate level you want to get to is tech, because tech is inherently scalable, right?
Right.
It's
Make
inherently
money while you
digital.
sleep. Kevin is asleep.
Thank you.
Kevin is making money.
That's what I need to do. I need to go to sleep now and see if I wake up with more money.
Yes, there you go.
All right. So, which is why, and I'm not going to call it a pivot. That's played out. I like your evolution in how you approach your business and how you approach business models, and approach everything in what you've simulated all these years into Dataffluent, which is more on the tech side of things. And I see the nexus between what you did at BI Brains, especially with the stock dashboards and everything, and then it just see it done at even bigger scale at Dataffluent. So let's first talk about what you about the stock dashboards, what you did, what you created at BI Brains, and then talk about how that has evolved into what you offer at Datafluent.
So pre-COVID, funny enough, in 2019, and I think this was more just a strategy, just to get like the community to understand that you can analyze and look at data in very creative ways. The idea kind of came to, okay, how could we use data visualization techniques, strategies, methodologies to create a compelling visual, a compelling dashboard. And that sort of aligned with annual reports coming out of the Jamaica Stock Exchange. So it started firstly with Grace Kennedy. So they had, I think it was like a 271 pages annual report that came out in 2019. And just looking through, I mean, these annual reports are pretty, they're sexy, they're snazzy. And then you get to the financials and it's like, oh, when you get the highlights, it's nice. But then if you have to comb through those financials, that's work. The dashboard idea so I could say, okay, maybe we could take this 271 pages, pull out the key highlights, and present that in a dashboard. So that was actually what we did. And that was available. You could download the dashboard. You literally get the Power BI dashboard. You could look under the hood, see what we were doing, all the formulas, calculations, everything that went into it. So that became very popular for a Caribbean company brand that we thought, I mean, yeah, people do know Grace globally, of course, but we didn't think necessarily that the interest in like analyzing the data would have, gone beyond maybe the Caribbean. So we had quite a few persons in the Caribbean, but then we also had lots of persons in North America, in Latin America, in Europe, in Africa. It was very interesting to see the interest for persons and persons wanting, like persons would actually send me email and say, hey, how could I do this? What if I wanted to do this? Hey, I'm curious about sort of taking this internally within my organization, how would I go about that? So it spawned like a whole life on its own. But that led to, I think it was over 400 persons or almost 400 persons that would have downloaded, subscribed, like, okay, I need to know what is happening. So that was kind of just like a project in and of itself. But then we noted that, yeah, there is something in the financial space where persons really want visibility of the companies, right? Or just visibility maybe, or in a different way to look at these companies. So did all of that, which was very interesting because we got good kudos from like Don Webby, who would have been the then CEO of Grace Kennedy. So it was fun, really, really great feedback from the community and all. But we went on, did consulting, did our thing. And just during that whole process at COVID, gave us a lot of time to think, a lot of time to strategize. And I think during that whole time, I just realized like, yeah, we really have to create a more tech-based company. And again, going very niche. So for Dataffluent, we are obviously tech-based, as in we're a data and research company, but we're focused around providing services, providing software as a service, or platform being one of them that you'd have mentioned. And the shift and the focus there is just ensuring that, as you said, you're making money in your sleep, right? Persons can sign on to use the platform. Right now, we're doing a pilot. So we are sort of doing a white gloves concierge kind of onboarding for clients. But eventually, what we want to do, of course, is to go out to the market to be able to provide that kind of data and analytics to the wider public as well. So it's really shifting from, looking at consulting and, very much, time, hours, outcome, value, that sort of process flow and shifting to technology, repeatable, cash flow. Seeing what happened with the dashboards, it was kind of like a light bulb moment that, yeah, there is a gap here because, in the region, as we know, for Jamaica Stock Exchange, Trinidad, all other exchanges in the region, it's not sophisticated to the level of first world exchanging and first world markets. It's still PDF files, still a lot of manual processes that are happening. So we're trying to automate that process. And just to say as well that even though we're looking at equities as an asset class, just by the nature of what we do, data and research, we're actually expanding and looking at other asset classes as well. I mean, we'll get to the point where we could even track and trend different types of data, not even just asset class data, but looking at, different parts of data that we have in the region that is a gap and that is lacking. So for us, it's like this is just the beginning. We're just tapping into what we saw as a need that came from that particular scenario, and just a need on the finance side with data. But there's a whole lot more that we want to tap into as a data company, but a data company, I just said, that uses tech as our core push and focus.
I think it's interesting because when you started doing it in the form of what you're doing at BI Brains, where where you would manually customize like BI dashboard for each company or for especially Grace Kennedy, you said you got about over 400 people downloading it, right? So essentially that's B2C. But now, of course, when you're thinking about, okay, well, this is a tech business now, and B2B SaaS is where it's at. So, so now you're targeting the B2B. And, it makes me think, right? Okay, so back in my days at RBC, I was in commercial banking for a period of time, right? So private off-market deals, a little bigger than mom and pop shops, so medium-sized businesses or whatnot, right? And the financial information you get is okay, as if the accountant have it, or if you get management financials or some rough thing in Excel or whatever it is. If you want to do some sort of comparative industry analysis, you better hope that you did a credit analysis for another similar company recently, so that you have the information. Don't bother to look for any sort of current information online and that sort of thing, right? And then I went to RBC Investment Management. All right, big asset management company, managing us. I think it's somewhere around 3 billion USD equivalent, because Trinidad don't really get US like that. But 3 billion US in equivalent in assets under management. So they had these Bloomberg terminals and whatnot there. And when I sat down on this Bloomberg terminal and I was taught how to use it, I was like, oh my God, this is the holy grail. you know, your boy was pulling up equities, typing, okay, let me see the ratios. FA. All right. Oh, let me see what the market's saying. RV. Then typing in all these little shortcuts or whatnot. And I was like, wow, this is the kind of information and platform that I've been dying for back when I was doing like private credit sort of stuff. Now, the reason I bring that up, especially as we're thinking about a B2B market, and maybe it's a tiered B2B market, but for publicly traded companies, especially on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, is the assumption that, like RBC, that the institutions that you're targeting, that they may already have access to a Bloomberg terminal, or they already be paying the however like 20K, however much money per year for a Bloomberg terminal, or is it that you're targeting folks that may not want to spend all that much money on a Bloomberg terminal, but just need that information on Jamaican equities?
That's a good question. So the clients and the companies that we've been speaking to, they already have at least one or two Bloomberg terminals in their environment. So for them, like it's an immediate, okay, yeah, I see the gap. I know the gap and this it's filling that gap for me, right? Because this is something that they would have had to do manually. So it's something that's gonna take time and has cost because you as a financial analyst, you could have been doing something else. If the data was already available, you could already just do your analysis, you know what is what, okay, yeah, I know what I'm gonna recommend for this particular company and you can just quickly go through and do what you need to do if you need to provide recommendations to clients or if it is that you're just doing an analysis for, I don't know, whatever it is. But you'll be able to do that very quickly without you having to say, okay, let me go to the Jamaica Stock Exchange website, let me download this PDF file, let me get all these financials. And, that whole process takes time. And you could have been better utilized just doing the analysis and making the recommendations. So definitely those clients already have that and they see the value and they understand that, yeah, there's definitely a gap here and this is something that can easily help us to save a lot of time and save a lot of money.
So it's like you give that localized deep dive that even though they already have a Bloomberg terminal or whatnot, it still doesn't give you because the presentation style that Bloomberg gives you probably won't be as nice and clean as your own. And also you'll have to click around a good bit. Whereas with your platform, what you need is right there at your fingertips, like you're about to show us.
I'm just showing you our demo environment and what we have is data for covering all the companies on the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and we're looking at the fundamental analysis for those companies. So you'll see all these different areas here, like income, liquidity, efficiency, and activity. So we're covering all of those key areas and key ratios and metrics that persons would want to see. Efficiency and activity here, leverage, market prospects, the credit risk and or projections, which is kind of like, it's like our secret sauce. So this is kind of coming out of our financial models and everything else that we're building internally. And I'll also jump to do a quick view of what you can see in terms of we're doing a lot of work to look at the comparables for different companies across different sectors. So, like here, consumer staples, Cinco, comparable companies, GK, Stepford, the Jamaica Brothers Group, Carreras, what does that look like for the market cap for the top five companies within that sector? And there are also a lot of other metrics and KPIs that we're tracking that, Kevin is like, yeah, yeah, perfect. These are all the things I have to go and calculate for different companies that I'm doing
Hey,
valuations on.
I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be a customer of this. Thanks for that. Thanks for that sneak peek. Yeah, I could see how useful that would be. Even if I don't buy any stocks in Jamaica, too late for that. But because I have already. Even if it's not for investing, just for me in terms of doing my valuation work and having that comparable company information and multiples right there. Because as it is right now, it's really difficult to go and do that. I'd have to go and calculate those multiples
Yeah.
manually. So for my purpose as a B2C customer, B2C pricing, I will yeah, I can definitely see how useful that would be. And also a platform like this, what it does, especially for the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and when you unleash it for the Trinidad Stock Exchange as well, it's gonna encourage more retail investors, so like me or the B2C people, all the individuals who want to invest or thinking about investing, but just don't know how or just don't have the information ready at hand. It really gives us that mechanism and encourages more capital moving throughout the economy and throughout the region. So, my hat's off to you on that initiative. I want to talk a little bit to the business owners now, right? Because many founders, they rely on instinct to make decisions. But in today's world, the businesses that thrive are the ones that truly know and understand their numbers. Because especially when it comes to capital raising or whatnot, investors don't trust gut feelings. Everybody's excited. Nobody's gonna come and say, "Hey, if you give me your money, I'm gonna take your investment and take it to zero." They promise you the world, right? But investors don't trust gut feelings for that reason. They trust data. But how do you make data work for you? Right? How do us as business owners who eventually need to raise capital to take our business to the next level or to get our business off the ground, how do we make that data work for us, Raquel?
That's a great question. And like on the BI Bridge Consulting, we would have worked with some SMEs as well. And that is also one of the key issues and key challenges. So as you said, like a lot of companies think that they're too small for like analytics or too small to do projections and to, manage their business in that way. But that's actually not true at all, right? Those things are not just for large conglomerate companies. Think all businesses would do well with doing some analytics, doing, even if it's a small base financial model with some simple scenarios that you can test just to see if this happens, that happens, what would happen to your revenue, your cash flow, or maybe nothing happens, your margins, etc. But that's important to have that at your fingertips to be able to test that. So in working with a lot of the small companies that we have been able to partner with, a big part of it is that these companies, one, kind of hodgepodge in a way. They'll have like QuickBooks, for example. Like, yeah, we'll have QuickBooks, we track invoices, payments through QuickBooks, but then they'll have like maybe they invested in like some small ERP, maybe they have like a Salesforce or Monday or something else that they're doing that has like another view of the business, right? And then they'll say, oh yeah, I want to have an idea of what my conversion looks like, right? But I mean, we can't get that from looking at just QuickBooks, right? So QuickBooks can give us like your core fundamentals, etc. And we can definitely get a good view of that. But if we're looking at your funnel to say, okay, your leads, your prospects, how are we converting those qualified leads into actual clients and customers? We have to get into that HubSpot or that Monday or Salesforce to tie that data back into what is happening in QuickBooks. And for some customers, because I didn't actually view it like that, in terms of like managing like an entire flow or entire funnel, the data is very, as I say, hodgepodge. So then you have to kind of guide and say, okay, well, maybe we can use like some data tags or something, right? To help with the process. So we know that if this person here over in this system, over here, it's the same customer. So we know that that customer converted, right? Because now we're getting revenue from that particular client, etc. So, like in going through that process, I'd say for like small business owners, be mindful of the tools that you're using in your environment and be mindful of sort of think at the end. Like, okay, if I want to do a report and I want to understand how I'm converting customers, how would I be able to do that? So that WhatsApp bot or whatever it is that you have that's capturing leads and when person send a message, it automatically responds, etc., and providing all of that. You need to be able to tie that back to that invoice that you're gonna create in QuickBooks. So it's kind of helping companies, especially small businesses. Like you think, to be honest, not just small businesses, because sometimes even the larger companies fall into that trap where you may have marketing over here, like, oh, we're gonna do this promotion, we're gonna give away a car, and we're gonna do all of these things. And then when it comes to you, they're like, okay, so how did we do? What's our ROI, right? Did we do well with this promotion? You're like, what promotion were you talking about? You know, I don't know what you're talking about. They were supposed to top up $200 or more, and they would get in a pool, and now you have to backtrack and be like, okay, you know what I'm saying? So you're backtracking, you're being reactive versus being proactive. So, as I say, large companies, they will also fall into similar, I guess, issues or challenges. But the difference is that they have the resources and the skill sets and the people that most likely can kind of stitch it together and it works. So, for small business, you don't have that. You may not have a data scientist on your team or a Kevin on your team, or, you may not have those skill sets. So, what you'd want to do is to think, I'd say, definitely think through from start to finish. So if you're running ads on Instagram or you have your website, which is a good top of funnel kind of thing, how is that data being tracked so you can know that this person who was just curious on your website and sent you an email is now a customer 3 months down the line after that initial contact. And what is the profile of that person? These are maybe some general interests or something like that for that person. You can start to create a profile, and from that profile, then you can better understand. Yeah, so Kevin is definitely my type of customer. How do I find more Kevin? Right? Because that's the key thing. I understand Kevin. He came on the website. He showed an interest. Kevin is a male. He's in his 30s. He likes to go out. He likes carnival. He also likes, soca and reggae. Whatever it is, that profile of who Kevin is, they're like, yes, I need to find more Kevin. And I'm going to market to that particular customer because we're wasting our time marketing to Jack and Jill because they're not buying, but Kevin is buying. I'll narrow it down to to two simple things. One, when you're thinking, when you have systems in your environment, you're a small business, I know lots of persons use QuickBooks, think through how everything will tie back in the end. So just think through like, okay, I have to create a report or I have to go to a board meeting and I need to present on how we're doing as a business with persons showing interest and then how eventually they become a customer. So just think through that process, literally like a sales funnel. So that's definitely what I'd say because ultimately once you've tied that down, then it's just rinse and repeat.
I mean, you actually answered the question. I was just about to ask what's a simple way for businesses to start leveraging data today, and you saying, okay, think think through processes and think workflows, right? Because just like you described, your data could be so fragmented across different platforms and different tools or whatnot. You got HubSpot over there, you have QuickBooks over here, and then there's this thing called Zapier, which you tell you could automate everything. And I've never used Zapier before. I don't know what to do with it. So like all of this stuff to me, simple old me, I'm like, what? But enter AI. When you tell me like I don't know if you have any real world examples. Apparently, you've been studying AI since 2002. I thought AI came out when ChatGPT did.
No, you did not. You did
I know, I did not. I did not. I did not.
scandalous.
But not too long before. Not too long. I didn't know it was all like 20 years before. Like yeah, I just been billing and billing and billing and billing till they could tell me to drink tea instead of rum. I I thought it was a brand new thing. Anyway, so yeah, but AI and automation are obviously transforming industries, right? Can you tell me, just based on your experience, any sort of real world examples of how AI and data sort of marrying each other to help folks make better decisions, better business
Yeah.
decisions?
Yeah. So, well, I'll start off by saying that like artificial intelligence is a very broad, I guess I could say it's like a discipline. And artificial intelligence at like I guess you could say at the top level is really around supervised and unsupervised learning. It's structured like it's data, supervised and unsupervised learning. And that means literally like what it sounds like, right? You have supervised, which means that there's someone kind of going in, tweaking things based on the output, and then unsupervised, where you're trying to get your model or the tool to sort of, figure things out as it goes along without not as much human intervention. That's just one aspect of AI, if you can think of it that way. But AI is very broad. Like there's so many different areas, like it's insane. It's a very broad discipline. But the thing with generative I think it's the first time that artificial intelligence field as a whole had something that was tangible that people could understand. No, people are talking about like agentic AI, which is like you're saying, building out workflows, getting like your AI agents to. So LLM is just really like what we call natural language processing, right? It's really just you say something, you ask a question, it gives you back like, language responses in your language, answering a question or giving you output, etc. But when you have AI agents now, you're talking about literally something complete an entire task or an entire workflow. You're not necessarily sending inputs to it, but it could use an LLM in the workflow, right? So the agent could use an LLM to execute. Like it could say, okay, like for you working through maybe your evaluations or something, you could create maybe a workflow to say, okay, or have this company gave me these financial statements and I want to do evaluation. That's step one. So taking that file or these Excel files or whatever it is that have the different financials And then you say, okay, the next thing I want is I want to be able to, step two is to assess certain key metrics for this particular company. Maybe you want to, maybe they're looking, well, it's a valuation that you'll be doing in the end. But, if they're looking to raise or they're trying to, bring on an investor somewhere down the line and they're trying to understand what is my value, then you'd be assessing, very key and specific metrics. So you could highlight that to say, okay, this is it. And maybe one of the outcomes could be you pass that information, the financials to the LLM and say, okay, give me like a report on this particular company. And that report should be saying, should probably give a valuation using a discounted cash flow model. Well, I don't know, maybe for a startup, maybe.
I like this, yeah, for startups also.
You like
Just
this for startups
it's
too?
all it's all about garbage in, garbage out. So just make sure the forecasts are reasonable and the forecasts are also informed
Mhm.
by your business plan, because we know that the forecasts represent essentially a target that you're trying to hit.
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Well, there you go. So yeah, so and so that you could create that entire process and then you could have an agent that does that, right? And instead of you doing this manual, and you could go out and seek, maybe say, okay, go and visit or go and pull this data from whichever website to be able to get an assessment of maybe some key metrics that you want to compare for companies in similar industries, right? And you say, yeah, go and crawl the web or whatever and bring me back this comparative info. So you're not doing all of those calculations. And that workflow could run, a number of times for a number of companies that you're trying to analyze. So of course, that's obviously a very simplistic way to say for AI, like what you're doing in terms of valuing companies. That's one way that you could literally create that workflow. The AI may be performing better than you, or if you make a few tweaks down the line,
Oh, that would be
it's like
awesome if the AI could do evaluation method. And that would be awesome. I would sit down here, click, 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 click. Here's your bill, sir.
there you go. But then the thing is though, like you should have a lot of like rich data, right? That you could train that LLM on because as you said, you have to go out and you have to do comparative analysis across companies that are in similar sectors, right? So you have that data already. So if you were to build like a workflow using an AI agent to ingest that data, add new data, do the comparisons, it keeps learning, it keeps prodding at it. I definitely think you could have something that'd be pretty cool. Something that could be a tech product that, as you say, make money in your sleep.
I like that idea you have there. I mean, maybe I need to talk to the data queen and have her help me, set up that whole AI automated workflow where, okay, boom, here's some financials, boom, here's some prompts, here's my thoughts, snip, snap, snappity, snap. Let's get a
Yeah,
valuation done.
let's get
You know,
evaluation. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I know the question was like around, how person can use data, AI, etc. But I was just giving that example to say, I mean, maybe not everyone can relate to value in a company. That just sounds maybe very technical and, Kevin Bright. So,
if
but
you're still listening to this, you're definitely bright. Question. If you had to tell a founder, a business owner, one metric to start tracking immediately, what would it be?
like cash flow is king, but like I think I mean, people just say track profits and those things. I mean, that's good, but definitely as I mentioned before, your conversion rate. What is happening with persons that are curious, persons that are, you know, not just curious, but willing to buy, willing to take out their credit cards and make a purchase from you or willing to take you on as freelancer, contractor, whatever it is, whatever business it is that you have. I think that is important because if you're realizing that it's taking you 3 months, 6 months for you to be able to close on a client account, then you need to understand, yeah, I need to be talking to, you know, how many clients per day or per week. And then if you're talking about converting, like if you're only converting 5% of the persons that you're speaking to, then that's even a whole different stream. Like you really have to be out there. You have to understand your cash flow, how you're converting your customers, and what does that overall lead time look like for you.
For me, I would have to say leads because
Mm.
everything is downhill from there. Without leads, you have no business. Without leads, all you're doing is looking for funding, hoping somebody buys your story. But yeah, you need to have, 'cause without leads, you have no sales. Without sales, you have no profits. You have no money to pay
100.
anybody, whatever it is. Yeah, so I would say, I would say leads.
But yeah, I agree. It's a good one.
So investors tend to rely heavily on numbers, of course, right? But sometimes they don't trust the numbers. What role would you say AI plays in making investment decisions more data driven? And I think this kind of lends to what you're doing.
And I mean, we can talk about AI in the context of investment and finance, but really AI is so applicable across so many different industries, right? Like you could think about so many use cases where AI is 100% applicable. And I remember like maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, when the conversations came up, maybe it's about five. I think the conversations are really loud during COVID. But the conversations came up like, oh yeah, these are the jobs that AI is gonna replace. Do you remember those conversations? Yeah. Oh, accountants, lawyers, Everybody was just like, what? So why am I even going to school? What is happening? I want to just be an influencer. I just don't understand. It's fake. So, so let's think about AI. And I say, like, I know you asked it in the context of finance and investment, but when I think about AI, like, when I look at the Caribbean and look at all the things that we could achieve, I'm like, we cannot sleep on this opportunity, because the reality is it's like the playing field is a little bit more level right now. Like you could create a business and you go through this entire process of trying to learn and build things. I mean, which is great, right? For human development and all. But if you really just wanted like a website up and you just wanted some things going, just go to ChatGPT and give it the prompts, outline what you're trying to do, and it gives you the code, right? May not be 100% accurate at the beginning. Maybe you need to do some tweaks and make some changes. So you could test it out in an environment. Ah, yeah, okay, now I'm doing this, blah, 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 blah. And it can give you the update. So I'm getting this error. How do I fix this? Like that is mind boggling when I think of what I had to do when I was programming or when I was building websites or doing certain things. We cannot sleep on the opportunity that's here with AI across any industry. If you have a business idea, I'd say the first thing that you have to think about is how can I do this business using AI, right? How can AI help me to achieve these goals?
Speaking about the Caribbean, would you say there are unique data challenges in the Caribbean that aren't as common in larger markets? And how can startups, business owners, and investors overcome these challenges and still leverage analytics for growth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In some ways, the challenges in the Caribbean, in some ways it's unique, and then in some ways it's like, no, not really. Like other markets would have experienced some of these challenges before, they would have overcome them. But I think where we have nuances, we'll always have nuances, right? It's not a like for like, oh, we just follow exactly what the United States did and we'll be there in another 10 years. Because one of the aspects I think for us in terms of like looking at data and data in the region is that a lot of times it's done by like multilaterals or multinational organizations that will do research. Some of those are challenges for the Caribbean, for the region, right? But that also exists in some ways in other similar markets as well, right? Where you'll have fragmented data, you'll have data that is just it doesn't exist. Like you'll be like you search for something and it's just not there. So in some ways, the challenges are unique. So part of the challenge I see is that, and even for what we're trying to sort of plug away at, is that for the region, we need data for us, but it's like, yeah, we definitely need to ensure that we are creating our own data so that we can pretty much, if we're talking about AI, right? And there's no AI without data. Like just to make that 100% clear.
100%, because AI is
There's
driven
no
by data.
exactly, exactly. So when people say AI, like it's some magical thing from the clouds that descended on Earth, and now we can ask it questions and it responds to us. Absolutely not. Like at the base level, these companies have, I'll try to be politically correct, but they have scraped the internet. They have scraped the internet, which includes IP, right? Like if you wrote a book, you wrote an article, whatever it is, especially books that are now, available, like on Google Books or something like that. They've scraped, they pull all of that together, train their models, which is really just running code over and over and over again until the accuracy level looks better and better and better. And it can start to sort of learn from patterns and trends. But if you think about the data points that these models are trained on, it's insane. But for us here in the region, where's the data that we can use to train our LLM, right? Which is why I said, like for Kevin, you have all this data sitting down in your little valuation folder, your Manila folder right here. If you were to take that and use that to train your own, value LLM, then the data points that you're gonna provide is gonna be totally different than if you just went and said, let me just use Bloomberg GPT. Part of what we're doing as well is we're also building models to forecast like macroeconomic variables, interest rate, inflation, GDP, etc. So we use those models in Python. Like we'll pull on those models, and when we use those models, when we start to look at the accuracy for the model, we had challenges. Why did we have challenges? Because these models are trained on language and data sets that are based in mature markets like the US, NASDAQ. And then we're here putting in annual reports and training on annual reports or quarterly reports from our region. And it doesn't understand when we say, for example, you know, some director change or something happened or just nuances in the language. So we've had to build our own lexicon, right? We've had to build our own lexicon to say, hey, when we say something like this is what we mean, right? This is the equivalent of this. And we've had to go through that process of updating the lexicon, updating, so that the sentiment model would be accurate. So that's why I say, like, as Caribbean people, we have to think about our data and how we're training our models. And if we think about it, bias is a thing, right? We have seen how bias has been propagated across social media platforms, across how different systems that are built by Caucasian males are very biased to Caucasian males because it's about their experience and they're writing and exploring from their experience. Similarly, if we're gonna build something, our experience is gonna be infused in it. So there's that inherent bias in data, in even the coding that is being used to create some of these things. So I say one thing that we have to just backtrack the AI conversation and start at data and start to think through how we as a region want to truly contribute and add value to that space. We have to invest in data architecture and data infrastructure, governance, private security. Other times we don't take the security of our data seriously or serious as we should. So we have to make those investments.
A couple of years ago, 2023, I tried to boil the ocean a little bit. I'm listed as a valuation consultant for this valuation firm out in Canada, right? They tap me when they want to do valuations like complicated corporate finance, sort of valuations, whatnot. That's the kind of stuff I specialize in. So through my relationship and working with them, I have access to different research tools, to platforms that have a bunch of research reports in the US and Canadian market. And Raquel, these reports are so niche. Like it's not just, okay, well, here's the oil and gas sector. Here's field service drilling sector or whatever it is. It's very, very focused. So it's like, for me, looking to do a valuation also, and I'm valuing this particular company, the report would say, all right, about this industry, companies in this industry do these activities, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm like, boom, that's exactly the type of company I'm valuing right now. And then it'll tell you, okay, this is what the financial performance of most companies in this industry are like, in this market. These are the macroeconomic things affecting this industry, so on and so forth. Here are the main competitors, here's the percentage market share, and all of that, right? So naive Kevin thought, hey, maybe I could get something like that for the Caribbean region. All right. Let's start in one sector at a time. So say I've identified the sector. Let me reach out to the folks in this sector. Say, okay, I'm trying to do some research on this sector. Would you give me your historical financial information and your forecast?
Wow.
I can't even tell the story without laughing. Because that's the type of information they had on that platform. That iteration never saw the light of day. So obviously, folks either said no or just straight out ignored me. All right, but that's the thing, right? Here's like people are holding things so close to the chest,
Mm.
you know. So it's really is that is what's that's what I see as the biggest one of the biggest challenges in
Hurdle. Yeah.
data. Yeah, because even if you think about like medium-sized companies, large-sized companies, a lot of them here they do have their own business intelligence departments. So they do at least have their finance and operations departments, at least have some level of information
Mm-hmm.
that they could give you if they think it's. But they won't because oh my God, what if a competitor sees it? And then they see how I'm performing and then decide how they're gonna what I don't know, they're gonna bad talk me at the bar, or what I don't know. I don't know what's the thought process.
Yeah.
They just don't whatever.
But it's low trust, I think, in the region in general. It's really a low trust sort of society. I know that's the case with Jamaica. Like, there's definitely trust issues with I mean there's trust issues with the government, there's trust issues with private public sector. It's just, it's just low trust. So that's part of the challenge. Because even for us, like we're very interested in like partnerships, right? Because you do have a lot of private companies that have a whole host of data. They aren't doing anything with the data. And we'll have those conversations like, how could we partner? And you don't have to worry. We'll anonymize the data. Obviously, we're not gonna provide this data as like a granular, detailed information that's gonna give away anything that you wouldn't be comfortable sharing with the public. So, we could have that partnership where the data is aggregated and we can provide this and we can do a revenue split, revenue share, and then we can provide that and just add to the pool of data that we need, right, for the region itself. Like, it's not me, I'm not trying to see what is happening in your company. Like, I'm not that curious. It's more so a bigger goal of, as you said, how can we get these different data points and data sets for the region and then have this now as, because the thing with data too is the value increases one in the current, like, how current is this data? That's one thing that will help with the value. And one of the second things that will help with the value is when you can sort of cross reference data, right? Like the comparative analysis that you can do for a company. It's great to analyze this company here, and the company looks great, but then if you look at what is happening in the sector and you look at five different companies, and you're like, oh, but this company not so great. On its own, it looks great. But when I look at the sector, it's actually below its peers, right? So when you can take different data points and connect, and you can look at maybe some aspect of data in Trinidad. What does that look like compared to Barbados, to Jamaica? And you can do all of this comparison. Now, that is really where you start to get really, the true value from data. Like when Bloomberg does I think they have like an emerging market analysis that they will provide. Like those things are like, that's the value, right?
There's this principle in valuation language where we say the value of an asset in its highest and best use, right? So data, for example, the email addresses sitting on in my HubSpot that I don't even know how to use properly, that's low value. But that's in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing, high value. So maybe data in my hands might be a different value than data in your hands as somebody who specializes in data science and whatnot. How do you think though, especially given everything we outlined in the Caribbean, and we have to appreciate that different markets have their own nuances, their own cultural nuances and social nuances and whatnot, right? How do you think that better data usage in the Caribbean can help Caribbean businesses compete globally?
Definitely, for sure, in terms of using data better, is being able to see that, especially for us as a region, I don't like to say like, oh, we're a doctor on the map, but really and truly, like, there's so much opportunity for Caribbean companies in terms of looking at data is truly understanding our market or region and sort of setting up ourselves to also expand our footprint in similar markets and regions. It's not just the North American trip. And that may be the trip to take. And that's perfectly fine if it is. But I think if we truly understand what our numbers look like, what our true customer profile, etc., looks like, what really works here, how do we transfer this success story in Jamaica and Trinidad to a similar market without having to blow through, lots of capex and the really expensive stuff. And then at the end of the day, like 2, 3 years down the line, like, yeah, we're closing down these offices in New York. But was New York really the place to be? Like, one of the things I want to be clear about is that I'm not saying don't aim for, trying to get an office in New York or in Miami or whatever it is. Definitely not. But what I'm saying is that the right fit for that particular company? I think that's where data and analytics really comes in. Invest some time, energy into market research. And I think that would help Caribbean companies to one sort of get out of the mode that we can sometimes be in of being very island mindset, all just in this little zone and we're competing like this competition as opposed to collaboration, energy. It's stifling sometimes. And I think it's not allowing a lot of the companies to reach their true potential, right? So I would say definitely invest more time and energy in understanding um your true market and what really works for where you're at, and then see how you could replicate that in similar markets as well. I think that'd be a great thing if we could focus on. So I could see like how Juicy, I don't know if you know Juicy Patties, which is a Jamaican
Oh,
company that makes. Oh yeah, of course
listen,
you know Juicy Patties. What
I
am I
went to
talking
the same
about?
school
All
you
that
went to,
time.
I went to the same school right down the road from you.
Oh,
I went to school
I'm
there
like,
for
yeah,
three
you and
years.
you, Mona, of course. So they eventually branched out into a store in I think it's South Florida. And
Not
they're like
surprised.
sold out every day. Like
Oh, hell
every
yeah.
day. Yeah.
South Florida. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, right.
Of
But it
course.
makes so much sense. And I mean, and that's where the US, like the North America move makes sense because what you're doing is you're saying, okay, and at least this is how I would do it. Where do we have a high concentration of Jamaicans, the diaspora? If I'm a doubles successful doubles restaurant and I'm expanding, that's what I'm gonna look at. Where do we have a high concentration of Trinidadian, Trinidad diaspora that is very strong? That's where I'd want to go first. And if it doesn't work there, then I'd be thinking, if it doesn't work here, then, what did we get wrong? In assuming that, replicating this formula from here to here did not work with the environment, is it in other external factors, whatever it is. But I'd say understanding data analytics, the market, and then really pushing ourselves outside of the comfort zone of just being in the region or being in one island or two islands is something that I love. I'd love to see for Caribbean business. Because we have some really good, solid companies and great products, great offering. I just love to see, like how Rihanna went out and created something huge and then she's coming back. Like she's doing it the opposite way, right? We're trying to here create something big in the region and then go out. But whichever way it goes, whichever way you want to spin it, I would just love to see us create more of those type of businesses.
Yeah, especially in that vein. So I'm launching this new company soon. It's called Venturable. We're building a crowdfunding and a community investment platform that essentially gives investors a clear way to back promising businesses stemming from the Caribbean. You may have touched on this before, but how do you see data playing a role in investment decisions at scale?
I mean, data is a critical part of that. Part of, part of what? I'll always say in my pitch when I'm pitching the company is, I mean, there's obviously a challenge in the finance space, right? The manual work, taking you almost a week or over a week to extract this data, update your valuations, the calculations, do research, because not just that, you have to do research as well, to see are your projections still correct. And I know you have to go here, pull some different macroeconomic variables here, there, etc., and do your forecast. And it's like a whole thing that takes time. So there's that value add. However, on the other side of it as well, it is when startups or small businesses, I mean, there's a whole SME funding issues, not just within our market, it's like a global issue in emerging markets, right? SMEs getting access to capital. Now, part of what you'll hear the funding institutions say is that, well, we don't have the data. Some of these companies can't even give us their financials. And if you don't get the financials, then you can't do like, some of the analysis that you'd want to do, especially in industries that don't have tangible assets like tech. So, it's like IP driven. It's like, to a lot of the traditional banking sector, like that's all nice and cute, but you don't have a factory, you don't have equipment I can come and repossess, you don't have real estate I can repossess a car, a tractor, something tangible that you don't pay your loan, I can take it back and sell it and get back money. And that's really a big challenge. But then how can tech companies grow in the region if we don't get access to capital? So is data important for companies? For investment decisions at scale, absolutely, it's critical because what we're seeing is that, and maybe in some ways, some of the financial institutions are taking the lazy way out and say, oh yeah, we don't understand, we don't have the data, they can't provide financials, yada yada, so we can't really provide capital. I think the data is gonna be critical and like small business as well as something that we all have to think about, startups, etc. Ensuring that we have our ducks in a row or financials in a row so that we have that data to provide to these people. Even though sometimes, yeah, it's not enough. I know that's the whole thing. Sometimes we're going through the ringer and nothing comes out of it. But the reality is that we need data, which is kind of like the part of what we're trying to solve as well. Even though we're doing it on the public side, there's still opportunity to do it on the private for private companies to be able to understand, okay, how does a valuation company. So definitely having the data and insights is gonna be critical for us to be able to get the kind of funding you need to be able to scale and whatever that funding looks like, right? Equity, debt, whatever, right? We need the data to be able to supplement that.
Raquel, what excites you the most about the future of AI and data?
Hmm. Ah, that's a good one. You have some really good questions. Yeah. What excites me the most, I would say, it's probably that it is truly unknown. Like in terms of the potential, right? So I think what is exciting is that the Caribbean or Trinidad, Jamaica, if we take a subset of countries from the Caribbean region, can, if they make the right investment in data, in AI, and I mean when I say investment, I'm not talking about like when you'll hear we're gonna have an AI committee or something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from the ground up, right? From primary, secondary, etc. The right investments in data and AI. I think we can 100% transform or prospects in the future and for future generations as well. I think that is exciting because probably for the first time in centuries, documented centuries, that the playing field is like pretty much level, what we're in right now is like the knowledge era, right? The intelligent knowledge era where everyone can use the same tools or have access to the same tools, just how we're gonna use them. And like we see what's happening in the US, and then we see China comes out and like one up with a new LLM or a new agent AI, right? And I think that's the space that we're in, that we can transform our collective futures for future generations if we just build those baseline fundamentals and invest more in data and AI and ensure that we're leveraging cutting edge technology that exists and not just sitting on the sidelines being consumers. Like we've done enough consuming. We need to create, we need to build, put policies and structures in place to support, like Kevin doing his, crowdfunding platform, whatever it is, but putting certain things in place to ensure that maybe persons are building certain type of companies, maybe they get tax breaks, just to encourage that thoughts of innovation and creativity coming out of the region where it can be so stifling, right? You create a company, you have all these taxes, and you can't get capital, and you can't get this, you can't get whatever, but how can the government or even the CARICOM region as a whole allocate resources towards ensuring that we're pushing innovation, right? So we push STEM for a long time, we push coding for a long time. But what's the outcome of that? So we've done all of that, which is good frame foundation if you think about data and AI. But coming out of that, what is gonna happen, right? Where's the CXC subject around AI and data or whatever it is, right? So why are we moving so slow? Things are moving so fast.
Okay, as we get ready to wrap, Raquel, I want to give you open mic, open forum, open platform to say anything that we did not cover in the past couple hours that you want to make sure that people remember from this conversation, or anything new that you want to cover. The floor is yours.
Ah, thank you. I feel like we've covered so much. I'm just thinking to myself, what didn't we touch on? I feel like we touched on like young Raquel and so it's really good conversation. But what I say, maybe I'd want to reiterate coming out of the conversation, and it's kind of stemming from the last question that you asked, like what I'm excited about. Like what I'm really excited about is really just the opportunity. Like it is very exciting. And I don't know if people, I think the challenges, I don't think we get it. I think what we see is on the consumer side, like, this can help me to do my homework. I can type something in this LLM and it can help me to get an A on my test. Like I think we need to move away from consuming and creating more, and also ensuring that we're holding our elected officials accountable to push things forward, right? And to ensure that we're properly leveraging what is happening at this point in time, right? So what do we need to be more to spur more innovation, to spur more creativity in the region? And I think that is one of the things that I don't see happening right now. There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of, different, let's say, theoretical concepts, but I think we're beyond that. Like we've seen things that work, different markets, and as I've said, we've invested in STEM, in coding, especially leveling the playing field with girls in STEM versus boys, etc. Probably need to actually do some programs to bring the boys back into STEM at this point in time because we've had so much success with that. So I think what I'd say is that I really want everyone to get really excited about the potential of AI, not just generative AI, not just the LLM. That's just a small thing. I really think person should really go out and like read about AI, understand the discipline, what we can really tap into. And I think that if we actually tap into that, it will be great. Like we'll set ourselves up for, decades to come, generations to come. And it's not just about tourism and beaches and sunshine, but it is about building, innovating, and creating.
So okay, so if I'm to just to recap my key takeaways here tonight, just real quickly. One, data isn't just for big corporations. Founders at every stage, they need to use it. AI isn't just the future, it's already here. Clearly it's been here for 20 years. I don't know where I was, but it's been here. And businesses that leverage AI will be the ones that win. Three, investors trust numbers, they trust data. So founders always make sure that your business case is backed by data. I mean, the personality, the charm, the wit, the sentiment is good, but data wins. Data closes the deal. So if you're serious about growing your business, you got to start taking data seriously. You got to track your numbers, refine your strategy, and make your decisions based on insights. And again, not just instinct. Raquel, where can our audience find you to learn more about your work and Dataffluent?
So, well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Raquel Seville. I'm also on Twitter. I won't say X. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram as Kel Seville, which is QUELZ Seville. And yeah, so that's my handle across all platforms. LinkedIn is just Raquel Seville. And of course, you can check out dataffluent.com. But yeah, so you can find me.
Podcast world, there you have it. The real value of data with Raquel Seville. Subscribe to The Value at thevalue.show/subscribe. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, Raquel.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. So happy to be here. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Podcast World, Cabin Studios, we are out.